do that, how to best reflect on those values and bring those values forward. Because a lot of times people will do them, and then, if we ask them what their values are, they can't repeat them. And so it's unlikely that something that you can't even repeat is impacting decision making in any way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what have you guys found in that area?
It's a great question, and I think there are a couple of thoughts that come to mind. One gets back to the automatic responses that we have. I'm sure both of you have had guests come on to this podcast and talk extensively about psychological biases, heuristics, and framing effects, and those things that we innately have that impact our decision making. And I think when it comes to those items, and it's something that we all have, we all operate with these different things. And getting back to the driving example, Sean, there are even studies out there that we're all so overconfident to our driving ability that we all just rate ourselves so much better than we think. I mean, than we actually are. So
right.
There are
most people rate
there
themselves as better than average drivers, which can't mathematically
absolutely
be right.
Yeah, and it's but what's really interesting when it comes to aligning values to behavior and decision making, I think you're absolutely right. It takes awareness, and it takes awareness of your values to be able to guide that. The other thing that comes into play is the self-talk of individuals. So when it comes to, not only do you have to commit those values to memory, but when you need them, when you're making a decision, you need to be able to call on them when you need them most. And that sometimes doesn't happen because of our self-talk. Self-talk traditionally, and has been researched to be, that 75 to 80% of our self-talk is negative. So if you're talking poorly to yourself, the odds are of you stepping back from that moment and asking yourself, Ryan, reflect on your values, the probability of that happening is very low. So there are things that we have to be able to take into account. And one of them, because it's just so ubiquitous in our lives, especially now in a pandemic, is that we need to be aware of our stress levels. And it's not to be aware to the point where we're trying to eliminate stress, because eliminating stress is something that is nearly impossible. And there are also studies out there that suggest that if you're not operating in a at least somewhat stressed environment, your performance is going to go down. So you don't want to be.
Wait, say that again.
So there are studies out there that when it comes to performing at your best, there needs to be a certain level of good stress that's called eustress in your body, because cortisol, the stress hormone, its makeup is very similar to that of adrenaline. And adrenaline is very commonly known if you are experiencing a car accident or you're running from a bear, adrenaline's going to kick in, and it's going to just seep into your body, and it's going to commit resources to all of your the important organs and let you go. Similarly, with stress is a slower burn. So with cortisol, it actually is like a slight drip, and the more that you have, the different your body is going to perform at. So it's similar to working out. So as you stress your body's going to respond to that stress and allow you to bulk up or slim down, depending on which way you're going. Sure. But as you get to that level of where you have too much stress, that's where it starts to impact your performance. And you want to come back, you have to dial it back. And maybe there are certain activities from a renewal perspective to bring yourself back to a stress level that is more appropriate to your work environment.
So I've heard of the eustress before. I've read a very little bit about it, but I still don't understand what the fundamental difference between good stress and bad stress. How can we identify that? I mean, I think most people understand what bad stress feels like, but what does good stress feel like?
It's been equated to be like that sensation when you are working and you're in that flow mind state. So your things are coming so naturally to you that you have a certain level of performance, your body is alert, which is a factor of that particular system of wanting to be alert. You don't want to be so relaxed that there are issues with you even trying to engage with.
You don't want to be flippant.
What would flip it?
No, I'm saying you don't want to be flippant.
No,
Right.
definitely not.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So it's just making sure that, and that's when focus comes into play. And focus is one of those things that, again, similar to stress, where we all don't want to. It's impossible to eliminate stress. It's also impossible to eliminate distraction. So I think there is definitely information out there that would suggest that we all have to be focused all of the time, and that's impossible. So Dan Goleman, who wrote the book Emotional Intelligence and has had numerous books soon after that one that was released in the late 90s, he wrote a book about focus. And in his book, he talks about how important it is to use your awareness to guide your focus. And what he means by that is that it's not trying to be focused all of the time, but it's bringing yourself back to focus when you are distracted. So it's a way to kind of shift the mindset a bit on attention, because I mean, we live in a world where distractions are everywhere, and we live in an attention economy where people are constantly grasping at us. So how do we bring our attention back is really a critical component to also performing at your best as well.
So there's got to be, if I'm understanding you correctly, there's got to be, in order for us to maximize our individual performance, there's got to be some level of good stress present in our bodies. Otherwise, we're not going to reach the fulfillment of our potential, right? That makes sense. Whether it's physically, mentally, if I'm not focused to the ultimate degree to which I can be focused, I'm not going to perform. If I don't care, I'm going through the motions, I'm not going to nail it. But other than simply saying focus more, what can we do to implement that or to improve our focus?
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that when it comes to how we distract ourselves, I mean, we are our own biggest distraction. We have thoughts that come in, and those thoughts influence us emotionally and cause us to do something different. And we could all right now play right here in this very moment an exercise where we could all think about a moment that made us angry, and that anger would be felt. It doesn't matter if that moment that we're thinking about was last year, 2 seconds ago, or 10 years ago. We'll still feel that emotion. And that brain, our mechanisms in our memory to help us when in a positive situation, like when we think about something that we're grateful for, also distract us in the moments of being focused. So ways to help us are a couple of ways. One, we want to increase the mental capacity for us to process what we're thinking about. And the way we can do that, and if you could see my desk right now, it would be covered with paper because I'm an avid note taker. Okay. So, and even when I'm taking notes, sometimes when I find myself, I'm feeling distracted, I will write down the thought I have. Doesn't matter how good or bad it is. It's just a way to get it out of my head. Because if I can get it out of my head, I'm going to free up more capacity to help me focus on the task I'm doing. The other component of that is also to acknowledge and identify the emotion that we're experiencing. So if we can label it, if I'm understanding that it's not anger that I'm feeling, but it's more frustration, or I'm feeling ostracized or excluded. I mean, those are going to be
really precise with the emotion.
Exactly.
Which is tough to do sometimes. I mean, it's difficult. Yeah,
absolutely. And it actually, again, a lot of the techniques that we talk about, whether it's values reflection or labeling an emotion, takes a certain level of awareness. So the question would then be, how do I become more aware? And it takes practice and it takes time. But the best way we can do that, especially when we're first starting off on this journey of awareness, is to write it down, play the exercise, understand the freeze exercise, which is what am I thinking right
Mm-hmm.
now? How am I feeling emotionally right now? And what am I doing? If I can answer those three questions, and again, avid note taker, writing it down will help you see it in real life. Because once you see it in real life, it's not stuck up here, it's not stuck in your brain or your mind as you're ruminating about the thought. You might, it just is going to spin and spin and spin. And for you to break the cycle, you have to get it out of your head. And the best way to process it is through pen and paper, which you can then see it in a different world. And you might realize that it's not as big of a deal as you originally thought.
Yeah, I'm not sure who said it, but somebody said this that stuck with me, which is that to write is to think. So to be a good writer is to only be a good thinker.
Mm-hmm.
And not necessarily that the thoughts are good, but to be an articulate thinker. And I agree so much with what you're saying. To be more precise with my understanding of my emotions is going to help me be more aware. But to write them down is probably the most effective way to articulate that thought. One thing that I've found is, and everybody's experienced this, that moment where we say, I just can't put it into words. I'm thinking I have this, I want to share this feeling or this thought with you, but I just can't, I can't really think of the right word. Oh, well, there's a lot of work to do then on my end to, to actually think that through. If I can't put it into words, then it's not because I don't know words. It's not because I haven't been talking for my whole life. It's because I haven't fully articulated the thought.
Yeah, and emotions have that effect on us, especially if they're high energy, positive or negative emotions. So things like anger or excitement or exuberance or fear, those types of emotions at that level on either side of the equation are going to have a really big impact on how we perceive things and process things. So back to your point, Sanger, if you can get those out of your head and see it for what it is, I mean, it's gonna change the input. It's gonna change how you are able to communicate with what you're trying to articulate. And that's what we do here at Think to Perform. We build people from the inside out just to try to make sure that as we are better managers of ourselves, we'll have that opportunity to influence and lead others more effectively.
Well, I think that's key. When you start talking about looking at influencing others, I think it's difficult to do that effectively if you're not in touch with what true emotions you are experiencing and what you're having. You can't help somebody work through their emotional uh, experience if you're not good at self evaluating your own. And if you can recognize that you're in a period of high or low emotional state, you have to have the knowledge to recognize that that's where it is the most difficult to make effective decisions. If you're really angry, you're likely not going to make a real thoughtful decision. Or if you're scared, you're not going to make a real thoughtful decision. And so it's important to be able to reference these values, to be in touch with what your emotions are. Doug talked a little bit about 4 R's, which is kind of something to go through as you're reflecting on those or thinking about what emotional state you're in. Talk a little bit about that.
The 4 R's are a great defense against biases. So, and I say it that way, or even just defensive traps, or our decision making traps rather, because they allow us to not only take a snapshot in time of our emotional state using those 3 questions: what am I feeling right now, what am I thinking right now, and what am I doing right now? Taking that snapshot in time of what we're feeling, and then allow us to process that emotional experience through the lens of our values and through the lens of potential bias and through the lens of where we want to be in the future, our goal.